All right, hello everyone. I'm pleased to introduce our speaker today, Mr. Mike Stubbs. Mike holds a joint appointment as the director of the Peoria-North Innovation Center and director of technology commercialization for the Illinois Small Business Development Center at Bradley University. The centers have a shared mission to promote business startup and growth. Peoria-North is a 48,000 square foot technology incubator built in 2007, which can house up to 27 companies. The collaborative environment allows businesses to share knowledge and resources with fellow researchers, inventors, and entrepreneurs looking to transform new technologies and innovations into thriving enterprises. Mike provides the strategic vision, the marketing, the recruiting, and the fundraising for the center. Prior to joining Bradley, Mike was a managing director of FTI Consulting in Chicago, and prior to that, he was employed by Deloitte Financial Advisory Services in Chicago. Mike is a certified public accountant. He's also certified in financial forensics, a certified fraud examiner, and a master analyst in financial forensics. So be careful, everyone. Mike received his master's and bachelor's degree in accounting from the University of Illinois. He was born and raised in Peoria, and is proud to call Central Illinois his home with his wife and 2 young children. So welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Do I have a clicker, or you would advance it? All right, great. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for the invite. So Peoria-North Innovation Center down on Main Street. Hopefully people are familiar with the building, but this is kind of reintroducing everyone to what we have. So as the introduction kind of showed, originally from Peoria, went to Champaign, got a master's in accounting at the University of Illinois, started at Deloitte in their forensics and dispute services practice, so fraud investigation, anti-fraud compliance, and litigation type damages consulting. Wanted to get into intellectual property type cases, and so I went to a company called FTI Consulting. A lot of the work that I was doing you can't do at Deloitte because you can't really be for or against an audit client or a tax client. So the larger cases then go to companies like FTI Consulting, where they're kind of boutique firms, and outside of that world, most people hadn't heard of them. But I was at FTI Consulting for 8.5 years. Most of my work was valuing patents and trademarks and trade secrets in a litigation setting as well as a licensing setting. For example, I had a lot of cases for Apple because they get sued a lot in patent infringement, but also did medical devices for Arthrex and Stryker and Alexion Pharmaceuticals. I even did strawberry breed patent dispute for UC Davis. So that's the type of work I was doing there. The last 4 years of which I was there, I lived in Bloomington, Illinois, and took the Amtrak up and back on Tuesdays and Thursdays and worked remotely Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The last full year of that was during COVID, and so my wife ran a early childhood learning pod on our first floor, and I worked in a bedroom on the second floor. And so looking for things that could give me an opportunity to give back to the community and have more of a community impact with my work, as well as kind of an overlapping skill set, I found these roles at Bradley. So Director of the Technology Commercialization with the Illinois Small Business Development Center allows me to work with clients who have different products or services they want to commercialize, or any questions on intellectual property from patents, trademarks, trade secrets, copyrights, all of that from a no-cost perspective. So going from consulting at a very high hourly fee to then giving all of that away for free. So if anybody has any questions, please sign up, and I'd be happy to meet with anyone. I'm also the director of the Peoria-North Innovation Center. Peoria-North Innovation Center hasn't had a director for about 6 to 8 years as a specific director. They've had people who've worked there, but they've done a ton of great work, and the building's done a great work, mainly because of the entrepreneurs and innovators that have companies there. And so I'm going to get into that in a second. The last portion and role at Bradley is I'm starting my first class tonight in Entrepreneurship 385, which is technology entrepreneurship. So also teaching a course. So yeah, I started these roles at Bradley 6 months ago, and so my family and I moved back here about that time. So glad to be back. Thank you. So part of the reason why I'm here is there's a lot of public confusion on Peoria-North, what it is, why it's here, what we do, and so I'm trying to kind of clear up some of those questions and get more of a vision and get more of a direction for the organization. So if you're kind of have some of these questions as well, I'd be happy to answer any of them, but this is kind of part of the reason why I want to present and provide this information. So a history of success. So we have gotten to, so it was built in almost 15 years ago. We're going to have our 15-year anniversary August of this year. And so total, we've had 50 different tenants. 28 of them are still active. 19 are actually in the building. They've collectively created over 775 jobs. And this is what I could find publicly and also with speaking with some of the CEOs of the current companies that are still around. And so these are really baseline numbers that I actually have proof for. The actual numbers are probably much higher than these, but the total equity and grant funding has been over $301 million of funding to these companies, including over $39 million in federal grants and awards. And overall, they've hired over 120 different Bradley's interns and full-time hires. So having that connection with that building has really been substantial for a student learning experience. Some of the companies that have come out of Peoria-Next Innovation Center, I kind of want to highlight here. The first one up there is IntelliHot. They make commercial-grade tankless water heaters. They received another $50 million equity funding 2 months ago. They do the tankless water heaters for, now they have big contracts with Hilton and Hyatt. They even did the water heaters at the 49ers NFL Stadium. So they're a substantial company that grew out of Peoria-Next. Natural fiber welding is a great success story currently, creating different products, one in which is a recycled cotton product that takes short cotton fibers and enables to weld those together to make long fibers and yarn. Using that product that's called Claris, they are now have a partnership with Ralph Lauren, who actually just launched the first shirt product with that yarn as part of a program or product, I guess, for the Australian Open tennis tournament this year. iCuro is a AI company that started at Peoria-Next. Now they moved out to Silicon Valley, and they're looking to have an IPO in the next 2 years. Endotronics is a company that does real-time measurement of blood pressure, and they are now in Chicago, but they've had over 100 implementations of their products so far as of this summer. So doing really great medical type research there, or I guess results. Elco turned into Brightwater Medical, which sold for $50 million, and that was a stent graft type product that was developed here. VirtueSense is a company that graduated out of Peoria-Next this summer onto near Sterling Avenue, kind of by the Portillo's over there. They create products that reduce falls in nursing homes and hospitals using infrared cameras and AI. So they measure gait of people walking as well as alert people if people are trying to get out of a medical bed where they need assistance to do that. So these devices have reduced falls by over 70%. And then Arvigenics Covercrest is a company that does pennycress into a biofuel. And so they've done a lot of great research there. That started with a team at Peoria-Next. So these are some of the highlights of some of the great companies that have come out of Peoria-Next, and I think we should generally be proud of that. I know in the kind of central Illinois feel, we don't do a great job celebrating our own successes and kind of talking about those. And so I really feel like that's part of my job here now, is just to get people to understand the return on investment that's happening at Peoria-Next and the types of things that are coming out of that. So if you want to go there. So as far as a model path of progress, natural fiber welding kind of shows why my role and Peoria-Next kind of tie in together. So Dr. Luke Haverhall's had an idea and worked with my predecessor, or two effectively, of technology commercialization, the Illinois SBDC. Went and was like, I have this idea, how do I make a product out of it, right? And so he got assistance through that. They went through the Brave Launch Business Accelerator, which is a 7-week accelerator course that we assist in companies in the area to generate their business model and get launched. Through that, they rented space at Peoria-Next Innovation Center for over 1.5 years. There, the CEO met the COO president that is now at Natural Fiber Welding, Steve Zika, who has already had an office at Peoria-Next as an angel investor. They graduated out of Peoria-Next into the community. Now they're growing and expanding rapidly. We talked about the Ralph Lauren partnership. They also have investments from Allbirds, Porsche, and BMW, because their second product is a all-vegan leather. And so looking at maybe potentially doing the interior leather of those different vehicles to reduce the carbon footprint of those vehicles in a way that's not even just emissions, but actually the interior of the vehicles. And so then we provide continued support there. Any questions that they have, we can help them out. So the physical space, Peoria Next is 48,000 square feet. Leasable space is over 20,000 square feet. And this has expansion capabilities of 10,000 gross square feet on one of the sides is kind of the green space on part of that lot. So just give an idea of kind of where that is. What the inside looks like, we have 10 wet labs, which are your conventional research labs. So when you think of a lab, that's where that is. So that's where the biotechnical or technology research is occurring, where a lot of those companies had used those facilities. We also have 14 conventional large offices, so office space of between 550 to 700 square feet, which really are good for 6 to 10 people sort of startups that are ready to go. 13 standard offices that are all rented now. So separate from the incubator mission, we also are able to use a portion of that building for any kind of conventional startup space. So if you're not doing biotech or technology or things that feel like it's in this kind of higher realm, if it's a startup, we're ready to work with you. And we'll talk about some of the current companies that have some of those standard offices. And we do have 3 conference room spaces for any of the public can rent. Tenants get rentals for free. We just have to schedule those. But this training room here on the bottom right is shown kind of in a classroom setting most of the time. We now have it in a U setting with some tables in the back. But for a full day, it's $225 to rent. It's downtown and free parking, and you can get any catering you want down there. And so just getting the word out of that opportunity is great. So that's another kind of look of the atrium from the inside as far as outside of the conference room. So as far as the rates, they're below rates as being an incubator, right? So we start out lower than market and increase each year to try to incentivize people to really accelerate their business and launch out in the community or in about 3 years. But overall, included in the rates, you get the free Wi-Fi. We have parking that's really easy on a lot that's behind the building. The conference rooms we talked about, 24/7 access with security, free coffee, and generally the community of entrepreneurship and being together with other people that are trying to invent things and do stuff for the community and their own, social good is kind of part of that aspect. So what's the history? So even though I said it was 15 years ago, Peoria Next started as a concept before a building, right? And so in the summer of 2000, Dr. Brodsky and Dr. Rager met in a conference room on Bradley's campus across from Dr. Brodsky's office. So Dr. Rager was from UE-Comp at the time, and they had worked together previously. And they got people together to do a Battelle report, and that report was going to look at what would it look like to do a bioscience research institution here in Peoria. September 11th, 2001 at 7:30, they had over 300 civic, corporate, educational research leaders in attendance to talk about that report. Probably some of you here may have been in attendance, and by 7:46 a.m. the world had changed that day. So clearly that was not the launching point that they needed for that project. And so momentum was rekindled in about 2002 with the inclusion of Caterpillar. And at the time it was known as the Peoria Regional Bio Collaborative. After that, from a PRBC, they wanted to kind of rebrand and expand outside of just bio. What would this look like? And that's how they came up with Peoria Next. And they added EDC in the chamber and what was the Heartland Partnership at the time, as well as with that. And so August 2007, this group of people were able to create the Peoria Next Innovation Center and have that open, which is a really great achievement from that perspective. The reason for that achievement is because the funding did include a lot of grants, right? So DCEO, which is state, was $4.5 million, EDA was $2 million, CAP put in $1.7 million. There's an SBA grant of $1 million. And then there was a loan of 3.7 to cover kind of the rest. And then Bradley University covers the ongoing operating expenses of the building. So when it started, this is kind of the collaboration of partners that were really involved in this initiative. And if we look at it now, which is the next slide, a lot of these institutions are no longer involved specifically with the, if you want to advance one more, with the initiative. So we have Bradley and the Turner Center and the Peoria Chamber of Commerce, and the CEO Council owns the building, and Bradley leases the full building. But if you go to the next slide, the strategic imperative is really to rekindle these partnerships and figure out where we can go collectively together and get this going. So as I said, it's owned by the CEO Council Foundation, but Bradley leases the entire building and covers the expenses, and I'm the director there, and at the front desk is Karen Smallberger, who works 20 hours a week. So she's been there for 12 years and knows everything and all about all of the companies and things, so she was a great resource for me to kind of put together some of the return on investment and what has happened and who's there and who to contact. So. Current tenants include the Illinois Manufacturing Excellence Center has rented out the third floor, so there's actually 3 floors. So the third floor doesn't span that entire wing of labs, but it's over the office space. And they assist manufacturing companies throughout the state of Illinois. The Midwest Bioprocessing Center is a company that is doing research in rare sugars. They received a $1.85 million NIH grant a few months ago, and then just received another grant last month, I believe. They've expanded from 1 lab into 3 labs. And when we talk about rare sugars, it's also from like a medical perspective, and so sugars are part of viruses as well, and so part of that grant is doing some COVID-19 research. Velocity Labs is a new company that just came in. I'd highly suggest you looking them up, and there's some YouTube videos of some speeches that they did. The CEO's from a city called Moscow, Idaho, and the lab director has just moved here. They have opened 2 labs at Peoria-North and are doing bioanalysis as a service. So they're a CRO, so pharmaceutical companies that are doing analysis of different samples that they have. They used to do it in-house. Now they're finding third parties to do that research for them. So they're just building out their lab now. The equipment's coming in each day. Part of my job is helping them move freezers into the building. So they should be up and running March 1st. Rain Construction is run by Bridget Booker. She's excellent. She was the first African-American ironworker journeyman and decided to start her own company. And so they started in 1 office. They've expanded to 2 now. She's a general contractor and painting contractor and ironworking contractor. She has an article with some of the advocacy work she did to get more rights for women in ironworking, which is kind of a newer entrance. And so there's a great article about her in the Washington Post from a couple years ago. Hakatolo is a company that does solar panel assistance for nonprofits. So how do nonprofits kind of get the benefit of having solar as well as those tax benefits that they don't really take advantage of? So how can they partner with different people and do that as well as install that in the right way? CSEdresearch.org is a company that does computer science research for K through 12 students. Engineering People is a company that's been there for a while. They do engineering staffing, but also now they've gotten into AR and VR kind of augmented reality services and how that could work for different industries. So that's the new thing they're working on. Central Illinois Angels is an angel investment group from the area that has an office there. And One Fire is a company that does marketing support and things of that nature. So these are just a highlight of the 19 different tenants that are currently at Peoria-North. In addition to that, I'm there with the Turner Center of Entrepreneurship in the Illinois Small Business Development Center. So some of the people I work with, Kelly Kruger-Hurrah is there, who works for the PTAC, which is a Procurement and Technical Assistance Center. And she assists companies to get contracts with the state, local, and federal government, as well as register as a woman-owned or minority-owned business, which is a more stringent process than you could imagine. So being there, we've been able to, as a Turner Center for Entrepreneurship overall at Bradley, but also through the Illinois SBDC, these are some of the results that we've had. This is actually from ending June 30th, 2020. But if you take a look, we were able to assist with over $2 million in financial assistance related to COVID-19 assistance there. But as far as working with clients in the area, we've worked with over 7,779 clients. November 2021, we had a press conference at Peoria-North. President Staniford of Bradley was there, as well as Peoria Mayor Dr. Rita Ali. I talked about the impact that we have here, as well as kind of congratulated Midwest Bioprocessing with their grant, and congratulated and welcomed Velocity Labs with starting there. So looking forward, we're going to start affiliate memberships. I'm waiting on final approval of the kind of the legal side of that. But in general, there's a lot of startups that they don't need an office yet, but they need a mailbox, right? You're working from home, you've got your home mailing address, you're trying to operate as a valid business. It's just much easier to then be able to say that your address is at the Peoria-North Innovation Center on Main Street rather than your home residential address. So be able to provide those mailing services as well as co-working and Wi-Fi space and discounts for conference rooms. So we'll be highlighting that. Starting up programming again through the Allen SBDC as well as separately, and bringing in different partners to present to allow people from the community to get educated in different types of information, whether that may be. We are doing Brave Launch. I talked to the Business Accelerator. We are updating that and kind of elongating that process and making it easier for different companies that are interested to be part of that process. Marketing kind of as well as other ways. We're looking at doing banners on the front of the building to show the tenants that are in there from a logo perspective. So when you drive down the street, you can see that people are there and what they're doing. Partnering with organizations that want to use the space and want to help out and be part of this community. And so I had talked about previously that there's been over 120 interns and experienced hires through these companies from Bradley, and so working with the Smith Career Center to keep that going and assist the companies on finding great candidates from the area, and making sure that the talent really stays here in Peoria if it can, if people are really interested in working for startups that are doing great things in Peoria. So that is what I had to say. So any questions? Yeah.
I know you can't create servitude, but you mentioned two of those companies. One moved to Silicon Valley, one moved to Chicago. Is there any way you could keep them here without saying you can't leave? I mean,
right. So, and there's more than that, right? In Telehot, as I mentioned, they still have a Peoria presence and a Galesburg presence, but part of that $50 million equity investment was that they needed to move their headquarters to Chicago. So now they're going to be in Vernon Hills. They're still going to have an office at Peoria Next and a Galesburg presence. But one of the things that we're looking at is, you have the startup space, right? And then let's take Midwest Bioprocessing, for example. They're at 3 labs of 800 square feet. What's their next phase to be here, right? What does that build out look like? And working with them early on from that perspective. Because a lot of places in Peoria, if you're going to build effectively a fermentation lab, your options are like 50,000 square feet. We really need a smaller footprint for these companies to then graduate into after being at Peoria Next and needing some more space, but maybe not the entire space. So working with Peoria Biomade from that perspective on just identifying these earlier and seeing if maybe there's some partnerships and ways in which we can get that together. As well as just kind of, I think the climate will assist in keeping some companies here. I think there's less pull to go to major cities and more pull to actually work remotely or work where you want to be from a quality of life perspective. Shane Needham, who is the CEO of Velocity Labs, when he was at the press conference, his entire speech was about the reason why they want to locate in Peoria is because of the people and to be able to, go to kids' soccer games or baseball games and then be able to go back to work if you need to, but just being 10 minutes away, or having FedEx being able to be here, Monday through Friday and Saturday and ship wherever from here and know that it's going to get there instead of coast to coast, and the quality of life and the cost of living here. So in general, just promoting that message, but really also trying to find those intermediate spaces for people to graduate out into.
I know Central Illinois Angels has an office. I know Central Illinois Angels has an office with you, but is there an advantage to having space at Peoria Next in terms of access to venture capital and angel funding?
Yeah, so I assist with that. I don't think necessarily, well, the advantage is they might be there, right? You might walk into them, run into them, having coffee or water, that sort of thing. The other side of it is that in addition to running into maybe investment sides, then it's also partnership sides from the work that you might want to do. From a collaboration perspective, clearly Steve Zika was working at Peoria Next and then became part of Natural Fiber Welding that was there. Virtue Sense originally was Peoria Robotics, and a couple people got together and then create Virtue Sense and created a different product within that. So as far as being in the building, it's just those collisions that can happen. And trying to make sure that happens more often with programming as well. But I think where those and the office comes in, it's really just being able to get that interaction and understanding that I'm a legitimate startup here working on something that has a space and the support we need to excel, and hopefully that reduces the barriers and questions that maybe the investors might have.
Do you have any availability for community public crowdfunding to increase community ownership of, Peoria actually having equity in these businesses?
So from a crowdfunding perspective, it becomes a little difficult from an equity ownership, just in getting into the legalities of qualified investors and that sort of thing. But as far as open understanding and information, I think that's like one of the great things that we could do from a programming perspective, right? Get people in and say, okay, here's what we have from a crowdsourcing expertise perspective. If you want to start crowdsourcing, this is where we go. If we want to create another collaborative investment group, similar to Central Illinois Angels in a different way that invests maybe from a crowdsourcing model, then those are ways in which you start conversations like that with different ideas and do programming around it.
One of the questions you had up there on, hopefully you'll be able to answer is
Yeah.
your relationship with Distillery Labs.
Yeah.
How do they work together?
Sure. So Distillery Labs, for people that are aware, Distillery Labs is an innovation center being built downtown that'll be open early 2023. What's great there is it's really going to be that earlier ideation space. They've got great spaces from a collaboration perspective and a training perspective and smaller offices, but they weren't designed and meant to have wet labs because they didn't need to have more, in Peoria. They weren't designed to then have those 550 square foot office spaces. So the only overlap really in general is those smaller offices that were already 100% full of Peoria Next. And so figuring out how to leverage that and be able to partner. So we're going to have office hours from the Illinois SBDC at Distillery Labs from a real partnership perspective. But being able to take those ideas and that community and that programming that they're doing as well, and allowing people to have a great space to then graduate into when they need those spaces to have either a wet lab or a space for 6 to 10 employees or that sort of thing. So it's really just kind of part of that path and ecosystem. And in general, I think it's great. You think of Pioneer Parkway, it wouldn't be the same if it only had one car dealership, right? So even if there is some overlap, just having that momentum and energy of people being here and the support that they have, there might be different people that want to be downtown in a Distillery Labs environment versus on Main Street in the environment we have there. So it's just really diversifying and partnering in the way we can.
Just a quick little story. When IntelliHot first moved into your building, there was an article about him. I approached him and told him about a water heating problem that I had in my building here. So we actually worked together, and the first unit that they built was put into my building in the basement, and they would constantly come and work on it when I had problems with it. And it worked out so well that after I think about 2 years, I had an issue with hot water in my kitchen for my dishwasher that was using 60 amps worth of power, and they designed a unit that would go with my dish machine to put out hot water at 185 degrees, where the one in the basement was like 140, 150 degrees. And they still come and work on the units when they need to replace parts. And so just kind of a neat experience that I had working with those guys, and now they're world famous.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for the story. And what's interesting too is what they're adding kind of from an IoT perspective, right? Internet of Things. And so the ability to actually monitor those and what that looks like. I mean, just designing water heaters from hotels just must be crazy, but they're doing great work. So.